two people come into conflict, and you, if you have this mature masculine thing, you're comfortable enough with the conflict to stay in the conflict, to stand up for yourself, but also to listen to the other person. Because you're not so immature that you just have to silence the other person. You can listen to the other person, but you can still stand up for yourself, and you can think calmly and clearly enough to like treat that other person as another person, battle with them ideologically, but then come out the other side, maybe having learned something, or maybe having had your two ideas come together and grow a third, as opposed to the immature thing of like, no, fuck you, you're wrong. No, fuck you, you're wrong. And then we leave, which I think comes from an immature lack of ability to be in conflict with a person.
That's sportsmanship. That's, being able to say, oh, wow, you beat me, I lost, and I'll learn from that. And
Totally.
That's cool. That's, it's hard. It's really hard to do that too. But I think like the more you can force yourself to do that, the more the good side of your aggression and masculinity will be cultivated.
We now bring you Enter the Freud.
This is for entertainment purposes only. It is no way medical advice.
How'd you end up in Boulder?
Short answer, school. But, I had a kind of a weird academic trajectory. I got my degree in philosophy at UC Berkeley and kind of started panicking my last year, realizing I'm not going to be able to do anything with it. And I had some friends that were in computer science, and they were like, oh, give coding a try. And I tried it out, and I kind of liked it. And I was like, okay, let me go to the academic advisor and tell them I want to double major or switch majors. And they were like, no, you've been here long enough. You got to get out. So I was looking at coding boot camps, or whether I just self-study and figure it out on my own. My girlfriend was at a school she didn't really like all that much, so she was thinking about transferring. And we found out that CU Boulder had a program for like a post-bac computer science program. So something for me, as well as programs she liked too.
I see. And so
now I'm done.
And is that what you do for work now, is coding?
Yeah, software engineering, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing that I am interested is you're also a pretty serious fighter. Like you've done that a lot, I'm assuming. Porn sent me some picture of you like having won like a gold medal for something.
I wouldn't say a serious fighter, but I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, you must be serious if you do tournaments, and in one of the tournaments, it looks like you won first place.
Yeah, no, I had a good day that day. It's better than the other guys.
And okay, so I think this could be a good segue to what we're talking about today. I have this theory, because a lot of the people I've known who've done martial arts or boxing or MMA or whatever it is, experienced some, I hate to make this overgeneralization, but experienced like violence, or sometimes they'll have a dad that is like super aggressive and kind of scary, or grew up in violence. In your guys' case, you guys grew up in these Indian boarding schools where there was a lot of violence. I had another friend, I have a couple friends who just had a dad that was just kind of like had a scary temper. And a lot of these people then later in their young adulthood get into various martial arts or fighting. And it sort of seems like it's a natural way, on one level, for them to sort of build up their strength and self-defense to feel safe. But then my other theory is kind of a way to like almost like return to the scene of the crime, but now in a way where it feels safer and where they can like find mastery. And so given what we were talking about last week, it sort of seems like, well, both of you guys, I would sort of theorize, have that to some degree.
Yeah, it totally is a way to kind of I wasn't, when I started, it wasn't the conscious intention, but I totally realized, yeah, this is totally a way for me to reclaim a sense of power that was lost during the time where I was getting beaten. And like you said, in a safe environment, it feels good to win matches. It feels good to win a medal, but there's not, like, one of the best feelings I've had in jiu-jitsu is, my coach, or I lost a match and my coach said, "Oh, good job. I'm proud of you." Mm-hmm. And to hear that after losing was like, I mean, I almost get choked up thinking about that, because that was exactly what was missing when I was getting beat up as a kid. And that, hearing that from my coach was like, a just total confirmation that this isn't, this isn't beating people up to try and climb to the top of the totem pole and avoid falling to the bottom. This is about something way, way more important than that.
And let's see if we can put words to what the thing is that's way more important than that.
I think so. One, if you feel like you have lost a sense of power or control over yourself or your life, I think it's a way of reclaiming that. I think it's a way it's a form of self-empowerment. I think it's also an outlet. Like, if you're training regular, like I had a bad day at work Monday and was all frustrated, and I was like, God damn it, I started getting pissed off about how I was pissed off, and I was like, oh man, is this gonna mess with my sleep? I went and I trained, and just, it totally switched my perspective. I came out of it feeling better. So I think, and as far as like more evidence that I think people who've had a certain background gravitate towards it. Last podcast I talked about, some of the situations my peers and I experienced in India. Two of those peers also ended up doing jiu-jitsu for pretty long time. One of them still does it. It's you're not getting punched or hitting people, so you're not accumulating brain damage while doing it too. So I think that makes it maybe one of the safest ways of getting that outlet or getting that experience. But yeah, totally. I think it's totally a therapeutic experience.
Yeah. Let me kind of repeat or highlight one of the key things you said, because I was like, okay, so you said it's not about trying to climb to the top, it's about something more important. Then I was like, all right, let's try to put our finger on that. And my attempt to sort of repeat or reframe what you said, well, here's my interpretation, is that life oftentimes is a battle. And whether it's a battle in a martial arts gym or in a boxing ring, or whether it's a battle in an Indian boarding school where there's no supervision, so the kids are beating the shit out of each other, or whether it's a battle economically to try to just like work enough to like make enough money to have a house and raise kids, or whether it's a battle to like try to like deal with this fucked up world we live in and make sense of what the hell America is doing in the 21st century. It's a battle on every front, and every day, every human wakes up and has to sort of like face the battle of life. And it's hard. And we oftentimes are just like plodding through as the world is like dealing us blows. And And in one sense, we can see that the meaning of life is to fight and win the battle. But you sort of said, no, it's not about that. The other thing you said is about, kind of my interpretation was, it's about like humans gathering together and like supporting each other and like being there for you and giving support or compassion or love or encouragement. And so when your coach is like, hey man, I'm proud of you, nice job, even though you, quote, lost, it was like, wow, that was more valuable than winning. Okay, so the reason I'm saying this is I'm kind of trying to segue into what we were talking about, or what we had planned to talk about today, which is like, what's toxic masculinity and what's non-toxic masculinity? And when I was thinking about that, I wanted to add in this, I think, closely related question that no one ever talks about, but what's toxic femininity and what's non-toxic femininity? Because I think if we could put that into a quadrant, toxic, non-toxic, masculinity, femininity, I think that this differentiation between trying to win in life or win in MMA, that's like a masculine goal. Whereas trying to like band together in support and love and in like a supportive community, that's a feminine goal. And I think both of those goals are valuable. And for you kind of went into this masculine sphere of an MMA tournament. But what was more important is this like acceptance and love and connection and affirmation from other people, which completely makes sense to me. So anyways, that's
okay,
I just heard that.
That's cool. That sets up a little framework for what we're going to do, right? So, but okay, I'm going to force you guys to, rather than just stay in this theoretical conversation that everyone has done 100 times, talking about which qualities are masculine, which ones are feminine, which of these human capacities are toxic, which I got really like thrown off by this thing of toxic. I'm like, toxic is not a clinical term. Stop saying this and stop pretending. Stop. It's not a research term. It isn't a psychological term. It's like, and then I just stumbled upon such a weird thing that this men's crisis has been going on, or the recognition of it has been going on since the 1980s. And then here's what I thought was really fascinating is it started with your buddies in San Francisco, Dave, that like Richard Tarnas and the guys at Esalen are responsible for that fucking term, toxic masculinity.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize it's a Jungian concept where they were attempting to bring in the archetypes, but they had some weird term for what they were. It was like I don't even remember at the moment. But so it's really fascinating that your favorite professors back in San Francisco were somewhat responsible for the initiating of men's groups, and this is in the 1980s, right? And so that's 40 years ago. And then here we are, and I was just a little concerned that today the term toxic masculinity is going to get lost into other bullshit terms like defund the police or fucking white silence is violence. Just like shit that in 5 years everyone is going to say, wow, that was fucking preposterous, right? Those concepts are nonsense. So my intention here is to force you guys to actually talk about what you do as guys, and then which parts of that is fucking rad, right? Along with, then we should stick with your quadrant model.
Well,
right?
I think we have to define what is toxic masculinity and then what's non-toxic masculinity, or what's like valuable, healthy, good masculinity.
Well, so on the way into the office, I was walking in with Romeo, and I see this little earthworm who had crawled onto the concrete, and he's right in the sun. And I'm just looking at him. I'm like, bro, you have like 5 minutes before you're done. And so I throw him into the grass, and then I go along, and I'm like, hey, little earthworm buddy. And I'm like, that's non-toxic masculinity. Does that count as non-toxic masculinity? That's my question to you guys. And if it does, why? What did I just do?
I don't know. That might be that reaching out and care and compassion. I don't know. I wouldn't call that masculinity necessarily. I wouldn't say it's not masculinity, but it's sort of like if you were gonna save something, and you had to like go to battle to save it, then that would be a masculine thing. Whereas if you had to save something, but you just needed to like nurture it and hold it and give it compassion, that would feel more like a feminine thing.
So you're basically saying pouring is feminine.
Yes.
And nurse the earthworm back to hell.
In a way, this is what happens when anyone tries to have this conversation, which is why I think it's just like so important to then have like just a constant back and forth to really what are we doing every day, right? Like,
okay, let me give a different example that we can slice and dice. Okay, so I'll try. Let me try to do all four of the quadrants real quick. Kid comes down, a first grader comes down like the second day of school and is like, Dad, and again, masculine and feminine can be in any gender. And it's like, Dad, I don't want to go to school today. School yesterday was so hard. It was scary. There's a kid there who's mean to me. I don't want to go. Okay, so here's a toxic masculine response. You fucking pussy. I'm fucking ashamed of you. You're a fucking pussy. Don't ever show me that shit again. Get to fucking school, you fucking pussy. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a toxic masculine response. Here's a toxic feminine response. Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You don't have to go to school because no one should ever be mean to my little boy. That's a toxic feminine response. Both of those responses are bad for the kid and are going to fuck the kid up.
Why is it bad? What just go into that tiny bit of this is just bad parenting, right?
Right.
And what happens to the kid? Why is that wrong?
Well, the toxic feminine response doesn't allow the kid to get in touch with his strength, doesn't allow the kid the ability to like learn to tolerate difficulties, that doesn't help the kid like deal with the battle of life. And it's not helpful to the kid in any ways. And it's going to help the kid identify with this victim-y, weak, I can always escape things. I can always kind of like sink down into victimness and the world will accommodate me. That's what the toxic feminine thing does.
Isn't that due to a misattunement to the child? Like both of those situations, the parent comes in and imposes some odd reaction to the scenario. They're imposing something that is not in alignment with what? What is that?
Well, it's just, I actually think I don't really want to be too critical of parents because I think it's kind of tricky what this kid needs. I mean, what the kid needs is obvious to me, and I wish it was obvious to all parents, but these two toxic responses are really fucking common, so it's not that obvious. So I sort of think that historically, developmentally, we humans have arrived at this historical point where we now have to consciously figure out what response a kid needs to grow into a healthy, mature adult. And it's not always obvious. And a lot of people intuitively slip off into a fucked up bad response. And so I don't know if it's education or what, but we need to like figure out how to parent properly and like get parents to parent properly, because it's not happening way more often than we would like.
So then how do we then finish the quadrants with the
Okay, so let's do healthy masculinity and healthy femininity. The healthy masculinity is like, oh, hey, buddy, I'm so sorry you had a rough day at school yesterday. Let's think about how we're going to get through it today, because like you can go and you can get through this. I believe in you. You can do this. And here's some ideas as to how you're going to be able to get through the day at school. And then let's say the kid is like, no, but I don't want to go. I'm not going to do it, Dad. I can't. Then Dad can be like, yeah, I know it's scary, but we're going to have to figure out a way for you to go to school and get through school, because like you totally can do it. So I'm going to help you figure out a way to do it. Okay, so that's like a healthy masculine response. And then the healthy feminine response would be, actually, I kind of did it a little bit already in the healthy masculine. And probably that, I think what's healthy about masculinity and femininity is if it integrates the other. I think it gets toxic if it totally doesn't integrate the other, is my theory. But so
That
the
makes a
healthy
lot of
feminine,
sense.
the healthy feminine is like, oh, sweetie, come here and tell me what happened yesterday. And the kid so is like, oh, this happened. And the healthy feminine response is like, oh man, that sounds really scary. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. And like holds him, pets his back, and just like lets him totally express and vent, and just like empathizes and holds him without getting him to identify with the victim. He can never do this again. Just like holds space for the pain and is like, yeah, man, that's really scary. I can see how you'd be scared to go back to school.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome. A thing, like those examples were perfect. I agree with them. Gerhard, what do you think about that?
I totally agree. I think I think healthy masculinity is or what Dave highlighted is that you it's about either finding in yourself or encouraging others to be stronger in the face of some sort of hardship, and without being abusive towards them. I think it's actually pretty simple. I think a lot of this stuff is actually pretty simple. The examples highlight it. I think it's kind of odd that our society is as confused about this as it is too. I mean, maybe it's not that simple. But I don't know what I mean. I don't know why I think it's so simple.
Well,
but to me, it seems like, just, it's extremely important for people to cultivate strength so that they can go through hardship. There's never, we're in a weird space right now, and it may just be temporary, where our lives are incredibly easy and we don't really have much hardship. And a lot of people think it almost seems like a lot of people think you don't need that kind of strength, or you don't need masculinity. I don't know. I'm kind of going on a tangent. What were you about to say, Warren?
Well, I'm just trying to get back to this great example of you doing the sport of jiu-jitsu and then having this kind of like almost restorative experience with your coach coming in. And then I'm wondering, do you connect with the other fighters, like the guys you roll with, the guys you compete against? Do you feel a sense of connection? Because a lot of what's being said is as toxic masculinity occurs, then you become rogue, and then you become like isolated, blah, 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 terrible things happen to men. And I'm wondering about this experience that you're frequenting. Is that giving you this a type of connection to men?
I think absolutely, in both competition and training at my own gym, the people that you train with become your friends. Just in order to survive doing jiu-jitsu for 7 years, you need to know how to take a beating from a training partner and give them a hug afterwards. Otherwise, you know what I mean? Like, you need to learn how to give a beating to someone less experienced, and then explain to them what they did wrong and know how to not hurt them. And then in the context of competition, I think sportsmanship is one of the most important aspects of like the good side of masculinity. Whether I win or lose, I would be I would be the most disgusted with myself if I couldn't shake my hands and say something nice to the person I fought, win or lose. Like, that's I think, kind of the most important thing. And I even I even talked to my girlfriend about this, and she even was like, yeah, I don't care if you win or lose. What would really be unattractive is if you acted like a poor sport.
Yeah.
Because I don't give a shit if you win or lose.
Yeah.
So I think there's something, evolutionary about, or there's something about masculinity that has to do with sportsmanship and cooperation. I don't think it's just it's not necessarily I think when you were sketching out the quadrant, Dave, you were talking about how kind of cooperative things are more on the feminine side. I think in some contexts, yeah, but I also think there's a certain type of cooperation, sportsmanship. There's a certain type of cooperation that's specifically masculine, where you can be in a competitive context, but have tons of respect for the people you're competing with and appreciate that you're all helping each other grow. And to your point about, or related to the little kid example who doesn't want to go to school, I mean, I've had to question whether or not I want to continue competing. I get horrible anxiety before competing. Just the week before, everything that can go wrong goes through my head, and I have to remind myself, it's not India. I'm not going to get knocked down the totem pole for losing. This isn't going to be a humiliation experience. I have to kind of calm myself down. And there's a limit to how much I can calm myself down, even if I'm going through the right process. That competition that I won recently was one of the few that I've actually gotten a 8-hour night of sleep before. So I've had to question, do I want to keep doing this? And I think it's a tricky balance too. But if I decide, if I'm going to force myself to do a competition, and in my mind, I'm telling myself I'm a pussy if I don't do it. And if I can't frame that in any other way than that, then it might not really be a masculine thing for me to be like, okay, I'm going to do this or I'm a pussy. And maybe the masculine thing is saying, okay, I'm stepping away from this until I can figure out a better way to relate to it. Or I'm stepping away from this. It's not a necessary hardship either. I'm not getting paid to do it. This isn't school where you have to go to school. I'm not quitting the martial art either if I don't compete. So I think that's an important thing too. If there are things in your life that you can't frame them in a way where I do it or I'm a pussy, it might not, I don't think that's a masculine way to approach a problem or hardship. But I do think it is important wherever you can, if you can reframe, if there's something that's important to you and there's an obstacle in the way, and you can frame things in your mind in a healthy way to overcome that obstacle. I think that's something that's really important. I think that's something lacking in a lot of people.
Yep, totally. You said a few different things there. I just want to go back to one of the first things you said, because it intrigues me. I've always loved that aspect of fighting. These days you see it a lot in MMA, where it's just a brutal, bloody battle, and it looks like the two people are trying to kill each other, and at the end they are hugging and they're best buddies. And it's such a shocking and kind of beautiful experience. And then this past weekend I was over at a family gathering, and there was these two young dogs there, and they started playing, but it was brutal. And my niece, who's 4, got scared, and she was like, "Mama, are they fighting?" And their mom was like, "No, they're just playing." And they go at it pretty hard, but it's just like play. And it sort of seemed similar to me. And then occasionally one of them goes a little too hard, and then the other one is like, "Bah!" And then they shift into actual fight mode, and then they sort of back off and respect each other, and then eventually they'll start playing together. And I was kind of like, oh, this is like a natural evolutionary thing in humans. We've been doing this for millions of years.
Yeah, you guys, I think you're talking about some form of advanced relationship to aggression. And this is really important because one of the top things that people will say the problem with masculinity is aggression. Like it's in the top 3. Oh, competitiveness, homophobia, and aggression. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a silly thing to say unless you're going to qualify, like this conversation is very, very specific into what is a mature relationship to aggression expressed specifically in a sport, right? Like that specifically in this way. And I think it's really important to point out, like Gerhard's example is fantastic. It illuminates the fact that you can go from a state of being confronted with terror in violence and then later on mature into a relationship with real aggression, and that then becomes a strange way to relate to other human beings. You guys with me on this?
I totally agree. I think it's super important. I think to have healthy masculinity, which is similar to have mature masculinity, you have to get into, explore, get in touch with, get familiar with the world of aggression. And that's tricky. And I think too often now there's the label toxic masculinity is used for anything aggressive. And I think that's a huge mistake. I actually think that's part of toxic femininity, where they see any aggression as bad. I think that's a toxic feminine thing. And I think it's more and more common in our culture that the toxic feminine culture is just trying to whitewash all aggression as bad. And if you're raised in a home or raised by people where being aggressive is scary, so it's never allowed, then you're never going to develop mature masculinity. And I think that's a big part of what's wrong in our culture right now.
Wow. Do you think, like, one of the most, I think one of the most fundamental things that comes out of learning how to have a mature relationship with aggression is just knowing how to stand up for yourself. And even in the kind of, kind of cushy lifestyle we live in the Western world in right now, like, that's still something super important. You've got to stand up for yourself in relationships, at the workplace, in friendships. Like, that's just crucial. Like, you need that, otherwise you can't really flourish in life, I think.
Totally. You'll get steamrolled by the world if you can't do that. Yeah.
And then I think this part of this maybe toxic feminine aspect of our culture is this just kind of putting guardrails on everything and putting guardrails on language or speech. And it's kind of weird because I don't know if this up and coming generation of young guys is growing up with if they're learned. So you were talking about how dogs, they spar with each other, so they learn what the limits are, and so that they know how to defend themselves. And growing up in India, but my friends who didn't grow up in India, a lot of them, guys give each other shit. Like, that's a way that we bond with each other. Like, you're like that was a way I knew someone was my friend, is if they were giving me shit.
What are you talking about, giving shit? What are you saying?
Oh, just, like I said you were feminine earlier.
Yeah.
In the podcast. Like, and we do that not because we're trying to, like, it's a fine line to walk, and you don't want to cross the line. But it is important because we learn how to kind of, we knock each other down a peg a little bit so that we don't, like, get too big of a head sometimes. but also we kind of like learn how to deal insults and how to have quick comebacks. It's kind of like sparring in that way. And you learn to let things roll off your shoulders too with that.
Totally.
It's I think that's one of like a very human equivalent to the dogs,
Totally.
Puppies sparring type of thing.
Totally.
Do you guys mind if I go to bat for the toxic feminine thing? Because I think this what you said, Dave, about that like the where we're headed is some kind of a merger of the two. And I think that like women are extremely fucking aggressive. Extremely aggressive. And they just express it in a very different way. And so like it would be great for us to figure out how to share the things that we have learned as men growing through history, because guys, we do have some really awesome capacities to, like, I have this weird fucking superpower where I can go into any gym and I can see a dude who's doing some workout. I go up right next to him and literally just stand there and be like, "Oh, okay, you're going like this. You're taking that plate going like this because you want to hit these fronts right here." And the dude will instantly be like, "Bro, oh, dude, okay, hold on. Here's what I do. You got to go like this, right? You go, oh, you feel," and then I'll grab a plate and I'll be like, "What's up? Like this," and it'll be like, "Oh shit, you got that, bro. Look at that. I can do that instantly, anytime, all the time."
Totally.
Right? Like, what is that? This is some kind of thing where it doesn't take much. And because in the world, to break that barrier of in-group versus out-group, where you can't just walk up to people and have contact with them. But because I'm a dude, and if I'm in a gym, I work out, and like that's all I need to break the entire barrier of we are strangers, don't fucking talk to me, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Like, all of that goes away. Whoop! And
Yeah.
then instantly we are now in contact, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's an amazing quality that is the result of this historic masculine acculturation.
Yep.
Right? And I'm just using it as a super weird tool to then break code and make contact.
Yeah.
So
Let me just throw this contrast in there, because I think what you're saying is really interesting to me. If you were at the grocery store, I don't really think there's any way to do the same thing. If a guy's looking at cantaloupes and you walked over and were like, "Oh yeah, you got a technique for finding the best cantaloupe," I think the person, it wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't instantly bond. Or even if you're out for a jog, which it seems really similar. If you're out for a jog and you jogged right up next to a dude and said something like, "Oh, I see you got the new shoes on," or "Oh, I like your same thing," it would be a little like not quite right. So what is it about the thing at the gym, and what places have that and don't? And I do think it has to do with like a warrior tribe thing more, where that happens.
Oh yeah, like in the surfing world, let me explain how unbelievable how it's even easier, right? If I walk up and I see someone is riding a JS model board, right? I see that and I ride those boards, right? I'll walk up to him and just be like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I have this same board in a 5.8," which that just indicates that I may rip a little harder than you or whatever. I just say like a small comment like that, and the person will instantly just be like, "Oh, dude, I love this board." And then they'll just want to tell me about how it functions. When this one it has so much speed when I'm in the pocket, like I'm able to pull off this and that. They instantly want to explain to me how, and then boom, we are in a conversation that is aligning absolutely, instead of like, "Oh, don't talk, like, who the fuck are you trying to talk to me?"
Yeah.
Like that tribe of surfing is super easily identifiable.
Yep.
So there is, I think we're pointing to something really, really excellent about the way that we connect.
All right, I want to say something. I feel like this is connected, but I don't know. But I want to go back to what Gerhard was saying. So Gerhard said, he said one very important thing, and I think he was starting to say a second one. I want to see if I can try to finish this idea. Okay, so the first thing he said is that aggression is important because it gives you the ability to stand up for yourself, which is totally true. I actually tell my patients that all the time. Patients who are like at odds with anger or aggression, I'm like, no, you need it to have strength to stand up for yourself. So that's super true. Okay, but then Gerhard was going on to talk about how dogs fighting or us sparring, there's some sort of like ability to like roll with difficulty or accept each other and even be friends. And it's kind of like this hugging after an MMA fight. And here's my thought about that. And I think this is a similar thing as Parna was just talking about. But here's my thought of taking that to the next level. I think aggression or conflict or sparring, what I hope that it could be another extremely valuable thing is two people come into conflict and you, if you have this mature masculine thing, you're comfortable enough with the conflict to stay in the conflict, to stand up for yourself, but also to listen to the other person. Because you're not so immature that you just have to silence the other person. You can listen to the other person, but you can still stand up for yourself, and you can think calmly and clearly enough to like treat that other person as another person, battle with them ideologically, but then come out the other side, maybe having learned something, or maybe having had your two ideas come together and grow a third, as opposed to the immature thing of like, no, fuck you, you're wrong. No, fuck you, you're wrong. And then we leave, which I think comes from an immature lack of ability to be in conflict with a person.
That's sportsmanship. That's, being able to say, oh, wow, you beat me, I lost, and I'll learn from that. And
totally.
That's cool. That's, it's hard. It's really hard to do that too. But I think like the more you can force yourself to do that, the more the good side of your aggression and masculinity will be cultivated.
Totally. I like that you use that word sportsmanship to describe it. It made me think, so when you see an MMA fight, occasionally you see a fight where at the end, the fighters don't. And you can kind of tell, it's usually one of them has some ego problem. Like Conor McGregor comes to mind, where sometimes you can tell his ego gets the best of him and he goes off and he looks really immature when that happens. And he's lacking sportsmanship in that moment. And kind of like your girlfriend said to you, Gerhard, that's almost the worst outcome.
Yeah. No, and part of the problem with MMA is it's not completely honest too. I mean, to sell tickets, they have to create drama before the fight. I don't know to what extent the drama after the fight is also part of the show, but you're totally right that he's an example of somebody who, when he loses, usually doesn't take it very well. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he's on a bit of a downward swing right now. Part of that could be because of age. I think he's come back from a torn ACL. These are things that can screw you up. But I mean, he hasn't shown a lot of growth in terms of his skill set over the past 5 years either. That's to me, that's typical of the ego problem, typical of, part of good sportsmanship is being able to let go of your ego so that you can grow. And, the ego problem holds you back too. It doesn't make you better.
You keep saying ego problem. What is that?
The ego problem we're talking about is the same thing as Gerhard said, is this lack of sportsmanship, is you get into a conflict with someone and your ego's not strong enough to tolerate the other person besting you a little bit. So if the other person starts to best you, you start to be like, fuck, that fucker's cheating. Or if it's just an ideological argument or like a political argument, you start to be like, no, you're wrong, you're fucking stupid. And so you regress into this like emotional, immature place where you can't hear the other person. You can't acknowledge their truths, and you can't learn from the conflict. You can't tolerate the conflict. And I think it's key. I think America is really lacking sportsmanship, say like in the political arena or the sociological arena.
But you keep referring to maturity as well. And so then I'm wondering, are you guys talking about something that, because you're saying, oh, this sportsmanship is cultivated through trial and error, right? Like, and lots of rinse and repeat. And then I think like, well, if you as a human being are not doing this cultivation, then will you never mature? And what is this thing, maturity, that we're talking about? That, because it seems that's where the conversation is headed, right?
Yeah, and okay, so let me try to give a simple response. What is maturity with regards to this ego idea? It's your sense of self through sparring, and we can think about two puppies fighting or people rolling on the mat in MMA, or the examples we give where boys were kind of like talking shit with each other, or just all these kinds of little mini kind of safe and fun and loving battles that ideally a young kid goes through. And through that repeated exposure to many battles in life, you develop kind of like a strength and resilience, and you can tolerate attacks and wounds because your ego is mature enough and strong enough to maintain integrity even when it loses little battles or even when it's a little bit wrong. And you have this sense that the other person is a respectable opponent and I'm going to respect them. And sometimes that person will beat me, or sometimes they'll know something I don't. Sometimes I'll be wrong, but that's okay. I can tolerate it and I'm going to listen to them because sometimes I'll be right and I'll best them. And even if I lose or I'm wrong, my coach still loves me. So it's okay that I'm wrong in this argument, and I'll actually be able to listen to my opponent and learn from him. And who knows why we're lacking that these days, but I think we're really lacking it. And it could be that it's because it's a growth of toxic femininity in our culture that isn't exposing us to hardship or to sparring or to ideological battles or to the coach telling us that we did a good job even when we lost.
It could just be the pendulum effect, though, of millennia of the toxic variety of masculinity, men dominating society, dominating women, and just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
One way I look at that is that the sort of Darwinian principle of survival of the fittest, like the fish with the biggest teeth sort of won and moved forward. And that's been happening from, bacteria all the way to civilizations. And so this masculine principle of kill or be killed has just been the dominant principle for billions of years. And at some point in the 20th century, humans started to be like, fuck that. That's fucking lame. Why is it kill or be killed? Why does the bigger dude with the bigger gun always get his way? And now there's a pendulum swing to the other side to try to like counterbalance that.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, there's truth to like, fuck the biggest guy being the most dominant. There's absolutely truth to that because, we're not a strong animal. We're actually a pretty weak animal. We don't have impressive claws or teeth or anything. It's us being smart and being able to cooperate in large groups that leads to our success. So I think that's important too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Warren?
Yeah. Are you guys like, because as you make this so much more clear where we have arrived, and then it's like, what do you think is going to happen? What as a result of this pendulum swinging, right? Are we going to end up with like the next 10 years, like if this is the stock market, are we looking at some kind of a trend where we're looking at some kind of a crypto winter here, where
I kind of think so. Yeah, I think it's a corrective downturn right now.
But so then, what do you think it is possible to then estimate, like, what is the what the hell? Let's just use our imagination. What would happen that would cause us as a species, as human beings, to move forward in a way that is desirable? What does that look like? It's probably a big ass question, but whatever.
Are you saying what would be the tipping point for our society to recognize that we need to embrace the good sides of masculinity? Or are you talking about, okay, we've recognized that we need to do that, what do we do to cultivate?
I like both of those.
Yeah, I'll let me state the question I think you're asking, and then here's my speculative answer. Is Porn's asking if we've okay, so there was this like trajectory of the strong get stronger, or the Darwinian principle, or kill or be killed. This sort of helped life and eventually humans sort of rise up. And then there was this pendulum swing towards like, whoa, that went too far, which seems necessary. But it also feels like part of the pendulum swing was this downturn. And it sort of feels like whether it's humans' inability to get along. It does feel like right now in 2022, there's this like conflictual downturn. It could even just be economic. And so Porn's question is like, what's it going to take to regain? I think there's a learning that needs to happen. And I think typically biological organisms, we learn pain is the thing that helps us learn. If you put your hand on a hot burner, the way you learn to take your hand off the hot burner is pain. And I sort of think we're going to experience pain in a lot of ways that is a signal to us that we need to make a shift. And my theory about the shift we need to make is we got good at like figuring out how to use fire to cook our foods, or how to use electricity, or how to like build houses. And now we've gotten super advanced in figuring out how to use technology. I think the next learning is like learning about how human psychology works, and what works well for human psychology and what doesn't work well for human psychology. And I think we're in the early stages of figuring that out. But now that we've kind of mastered nature, because we've mastered food production, or heating our homes, or being safe from saber-toothed tigers, we've kind of mastered that. But now we got to figure out human psychology, because like we're kind of fucking it up because we don't understand what humans need. So I think we need to learn. And I think there's a lot of good clues out there. I think the info is, we're getting closer and closer to knowing it, but then it sort of needs to be disseminated. Kind of like this parenting thing. I think a lot of parents, what I said, which seemed obvious to Gerhard, it's not obvious to a lot of parents. And I think parents aren't doing that with their kids. They're raising fucked up kids that then go and are fucked up adults.